So I've been wanting to do a video like this for a while now. Been seeing a lot of posts on Reddit, forums and so on about Windows running slow, Windows needing a fresh install every 6 months, 12 months, what have you. I've had the same install on my PC since Windows Vista, just been doing an in-place upgrade every time. Never had an issue, but my month-round maintenance and sort of manual cleanup and everything like that is quite regimented. So just wanted to show what I do and how my system stays running really fast all the time. It essentially feels and runs like a fresh install. Okay, so you saw how quick the boot time there was from a cold boot, probably about 20 seconds or less. Most of that time is usually taken up by the BIOS boot process, as I mentioned earlier. So I've created a folder called maintenance, and this is where I put a bunch of shortcuts. I'm going to focus on what I do month round just to make sure there's no clutter left over from old game uninstalls, application uninstalls, and just in general good housekeeping just to keep things clutter free. So if I show you my C drive as an example, you'll notice that there's very little clutter. Everything I've got in these folders, program files and x86, these are things that I've got currently installed, which I do use on a regular basis. And for the start menu, I'm using Start All Back, which is free. I believe there's a free trial of it, and then you pay a few pounds or dollars to unlock the full version. Well worth it. You unlock a whole bunch of options of getting back the taskbar, start menu, and things how you want it. Some people like the Windows 11's new start menu. I'm indifferent. I just prefer the old school way. So even though you're using Start All Back, you can middle click to get the old one back, or just normal click or winky on the keyboard to get the Start All Back. Everything's organized in one big list, which I'm fine with, because it just means I can begin typing of something and it's there, as well as settings and everything else as well. It's just nicer, more organized. Anyway, so there's one tool that I do want to focus on as well, Revo Uninstaller. This was recommended to me by people on Reddit a while back, and it's been invaluable really. So every time I install something, let's install Half-Life 1. So it's not very big, it will take seconds to install, which is fine. Just let that do its thing. Okay, so that's Half-Life installed, and you can see it there. And what I'm going to do now is every time I uninstall something, so if I've installed a game and I've got a whole bunch of other games installed, then I might want to free up some space because I've got a new game pending, preloading or whatever, and my 1 terabyte drive where games install is getting a bit low on space. So instead of uninstalling it through Steam or through the usual uninstall box within Windows, what I'm going to do is uninstall it through Revo Uninstaller. So just open up Revo, right click, uninstall. You can tick to create a system restore point if you want, it's not important. I just do for peace of mind anyway. Click continue. That will trigger the default uninstaller. So in this case within Steam, click uninstall. That's Half-Life uninstalled off my system now. And back on the dialog, I'll click advanced to do the scan within Revo. And what that will do, or what that has been doing, is monitoring the uninstall process of the game through the default uninstaller. And now it's going to see what it's left behind. So just let it do the scan. And you can see it's found some files that it's left behind on the C drive. And I know these are Half-Life files because it's referencing them straight away. So just click on delete, and that's it. That's clutter from your uninstalled games gone. And you'll find 90% of games will always leave stuff behind. They won't clean up after themselves from your main program files areas. If they leave stuff in your documents area, this is fine, and this is normal behavior. Games should not be removing stuff from your saved games folders within your documents library, because that's where your saved games and things will be stored. So that's normal and expected. So always expect there to be things there. So for example, I've got Witcher 3 game save settings and so on being stored by the game in my documents library. So that's how I maintain a clean OS within the registry, program files, folders, and so on, month round. But how do you clean up folders and files left behind by uninstalled games and apps before you started using Revo? Revo is a free tool, but not everyone knows about it. I didn't know about it until I saw it mentioned on Reddit. So what I've done for those is created a list of shortcuts to app data locations, commonly where games, apps, and software will store stuff. And when you uninstall them, they won't clean up after themselves. So the main culprit is app data, the app data folder, which contains a local and temp. So within here, oh, sorry, not that one. It's the app data folder where you'll have local and roaming. And that app data folder is located on your C drive under your username and then the app data folder itself. So if I navigate to there, you'll see it's not visible there by default because it's a hidden system folder. So go to the View tab, View button on the toolbar, click Show, and then click Show Hidden Items. And it's this folder here. So that's what we've got. And then from there, you can create a shortcut to it. And then once you've created the shortcut, you can then either delete it or move it to somewhere convenient if you're going to use it elsewhere. So we just go to Show, Hide again. And as I've already got the shortcut here, I can get rid of the desktop one. And you'll have 3 folders here within app data. Local load, don't need to worry about, nothing really puts anything in there, not even Windows, but it's there anyway by default. Local, you will find stuff lying around. So just a moment ago, I found a folder for GOG Galaxy. I have uninstalled GOG, but I forgot to use Revo Uninstaller on purpose, so I can show you an example of what I meant. So in here would have been a folder called gog.com. So I've manually deleted that folder because I know I've uninstalled it and there's nothing left over. And you can just have a look around. So here at the moment, everything else remaining is stuff that I'm using. The roaming folder equally will have similar things. You might find a folder for an old game that you've uninstalled, Epic Launcher, Red Launcher for Cyberpunk, or something like that. Witcher 3 I've got installed, so that's fine. It's just a random file in there, so that's okay. In terms of cleaning up registry items, I use CCleaner Portable. There's a lot of stigma around CCleaner since it updated, so I'm not using the updated version. I am using the portable free version, which still retains the old school functions and features, but I am not using the default selections within it either. It's important to note because if you leave the default selections all on, you run an analyze and then you do a clean, you will 90% of the time end up removing stuff that you don't want to remove that might mess up Windows or many of your other apps that you've got installed. So my preference is to only have Windows system stuff that I know I want to clean and just run through those. And in the applications tab, I've also got nothing selected because I'm not really interested in cleaning up anything else. You can select some things here if you want, if you know you're going to want to clean those up, but for me, no, I'm only interested in obsolete entries within the registry that I know are safe to delete. So I've got those selected, run analyze. Nothing's been found. Normally if there's remnants from old files or shortcuts or something like that that you didn't use Revo to uninstall, it will show them here. You can just verify them by eyeballing them, then click Run Cleaner to clean them up. Similarly, on the Registry tab, do exactly the same, and it will show you a list of things left behind by uninstalled games or software entries or shortcuts in the desktop which are referencing invalid links because you've deleted the shortcut, and the same applies there basically as well. Those are the only 2 tabs within CCleaner Portal that I focus on. Everything else I don't bother with. So I don't know why it's just crashed there, but I don't think that feature works very well. So yeah, custom scan, and registry. And custom scan will also find temporary files, memory dumps, Windows Update error logs, driver packages that are no longer needed, that kind of thing. You've also got the Windows built-in disk cleanup tool. So if I just run that, click on System, And this loads up the old school Windows disk cleanup tool that has been around since the very early days of Windows. Now, you do have a modern version of this within Windows 11 settings. So if you click on the settings icon, I've also got a shortcut here which loads the same thing. Click on storage, let storage sense do its thing. And then when you click into it, you can get a rundown of what it's found, what you can clean up, and it should be a mirror image of what you see here, just in a nicer interface. And I like this especially because you get a rundown of what you're cleaning. So if I click on other, you can see various folders which are taking up potentially a lot of space that you might want to investigate and look at. So if I just open that folder, it just opens in File Explorer straight away. So it just gives you a good way to see what's taking up what. If you like this sort of interface as well, I also have a tool that I use called WizTree. And what that does is, it's under System Tools, WizTree. And this will just scan. And exactly the same as this, it visualizes and tree lists the whole state of your drive, whatever one you're scanning. So you can get a visual representation of what's taking up what, where those files are. You can then go into the Explorer folder and it just shows you those folders straight away. And then as you're clicking through on them, you can see on the tree it selects them as well. And you can just drill down that way and maintain your drive. So if you're a bit unsure about what's taking up what, tool like this, WizTree, will show you a rundown of exactly what's being used where, so you can pinpoint any old files. Call of Duty gamers will know if you've uninstalled the game, or Battlefields as well, it almost certainly will leave behind massive folders. Some people on Reddit have said they've found 200 to 300 gigs of old game data that they're just taking up space because the games are gone. There's no need to waste up that SSD space. So that's how I clean and maintain my system on a monthly basis. And the remaining folders are just standard stuff. So start menu folder, for example, all of my shortcuts and things. If it's a bit too tedious to do it this way by right-clicking, rename and so on, I just go to the manual location and then just manage what I need to through here. Just makes it a lot easier. So that's my maintenance folder. In terms of backups, I use Windows built-in backup. Sorry, not that one. Backup and restore. There's two parts of this. One is the create system image. What this does is it creates a VHD, Windows VHD image of your chosen drive, and then you can store that image directly onto a USB drive. So I've got a 5 terabyte backup drive that I use for those backups. So anything that isn't going to cloud is going to that backup drive. And the VHD drive can be browsed. You can just click on it and browse it like a Windows folder, and you can just copy files back, so you can restore files easily that way as well. And because it's a VHD image, you can then restore it back to your C drive. So if your OS drive tanks or your drive fails and needs to replace it, you can just use a system image and use the repair disk you get prompted to create after the image creates itself, and then boot with that repair disk and then restore your system image off the USB drive. And it's essentially a clone, so it will clone itself back over to your new drive or your fresh install drive with your system image exactly how it was, and it'll be as if you never had anything happen to it at all. So that's really cool. It's a free tool built into Windows and it just works. The other tool that I use is Optimized Drives, previously known as Disk Defragmenter. So if you've only got SSDs, it's only going to be called Optimize. Otherwise, you'll see defragment as well if you've got hard drives in there. So both of my drives are SSDs, so that's fine. Optimize is important to run on. Well, you can run it monthly. I run it weekly out of habit, and what that will do is it will trim your SSDs, keep them in good shape, garbage collection, and so on. The drives controller internally should be doing that anyway, but Windows just handles all that all fine. I am using the tabbed interface in Windows Explorer as well. So if you've got Windows 11 and it is up to date with 22H2, you can middle click on any folder that you are actively working in, and that will open the tab, and middle click to close them again. What you can't do though is you can't drag a tab from one window in Explorer to another, which is slightly annoying. So the only way around that I found is to copy the address, open, and then paste it in. Oops. Suppose I'll do it that way. And it works that way. It's a bit more tedious, but if you're working in one folder anyway, then kind of makes it easy to do it that way. In terms of browsers, I use Firefox. Cold boot again, it loaded really quickly as you just saw there, and I've got no issues with it at all. It's really quick. I have no issues with it whatsoever. Highly recommended. Just run through some of those. Drive maintenance. How do I check up on the health of my drives? Well, I use two utilities. Because my SSDs are Samsung, I use Samsung Magician. This is also very good. So if I ever update my drive to a bigger unit, a bigger SSD, then Samsung's Magician has data migration built in. What this will do, it will clone your OS drive to a new drive without having to restart into boot mode or anything like that. It just does it, shuts down, you can swap the drives over and then boot up with your new drive with your new space. So that's really helpful. It allows you to update your firmware of the drives if there's anything available. Performance benchmarks and so on are all really useful within this as well. So that's Samsung Magician. Alternatively, if you don't have a Samsung drive, Western Digital will do a tool called Dashboard, does the same thing. And also there is Crystal Disk Info, which is also very good, and this is free. So this lists the exact same stuff that Samsung Magician does, but in a different interface, and it works with all drives as well. I also have, within System Info Tools, a bunch of other stuff that I use, so I might as well just open this and run through those. TCP View is quite handy. If I ever want to see what applications are connecting to what, so if I'm unsure one day that I might have downloaded something or clicked something, this will show you the list of established connections and from what software. So you can get a good idea if a piece of malware might be installed on your system, and then you can install another tool to get rid of it or use Windows Defender if it's not already pulled up. So that's quite good for that. Space Sniffer I still use, so essentially it does the same thing as WizTree, just in a more simplified interface. I can probably get rid of this now because WizTree's basically taken over everything, but it does the same thing. They're both free as well, so I've just kept them. Share Watcher is quite good, so if you share files and folders within your network, then you do need to run it as administrator. It will show you those shares. So I do have a small home network which I do share some folders and locations with, and I do access from my phone as well, so this makes those easy to see, and it shows you who's accessing or what device is connected to that share at that moment as well, which is quite handy. Revo and install I've been through. Process Explorer is quite good as well if you want to get a rundown of what applications might be holding your system up. So if you get a lot of stuttering going on, or you're seeing Task Manager's CPU usage not being adequate, and Task Manager itself doesn't give you really ingrained, detailed information, then Process Explorer can do that. So that's quite thorough, which is quite good. Again, a free utility. Hardware Info 64, I use that quite religiously, so I'm using that to monitor fan speeds, just see if any of my fans have stopped working, GPU temperatures, CPU temperatures, disk drive smart info is all registered on there as well. I tend to use this more if I'm gaming, so I can see how much my GPU and so on are being pushed. So this is quite good. It does require some initial setup as well, so by default you probably don't want to show everything that it shows. So I've only got it trimmed down to the important stuff that I regularly check up on. To see page file usage and things, it's actually really good for that as well. So there is that. CPU-Z, GPU-Z, they're a given. I don't need to explain what those do, so those are really good. Crystal Disk Mark is good as well. So if you're unsure if your disk drives are kind of getting on their way, or if there's a health issue or performance issue or something like that, just run Crystal Disk Mark, and then you can reference that against people's online scores, what other people post on forums and Reddit and places like that. So it's a good way of gauging if your drives are running in good shape or not. Autoruns is a very good utility. This is telemetry based. So for example, a few years back there was a whole load of huff-puff about NVIDIA's GeForce experience and some of NVIDIA's drivers spying on you or sending data back to NVIDIA. So you could drill down within Autoruns. So if I do NVIDIA, and you can see all the enabled background services and tasks that the NVIDIA GeForce experience and NVIDIA driver will be running. So there is some telemetry stuff in there as well. So at the moment I've got them all enabled, but you can then singly just disable what you don't want if you know you're not going to use it. So some of these are telemetry stuff, some of these are crash reports, but it's not just isolated to NVIDIA, you can just do it on anything as well. So let's use Valve, for example, for Steam. So there's some Steam stuff there. Yeah, so that's quite handy if you're a bit of a power user and you want to tinker around and clean up things even more. Another area to go to check for things that might be slowing your system down is the Startup tab in Task Manager. So which is this one here. And you can see I've got some stuff disabled already, and the usual stuff that I will be using or I do use on a regular basis, they are enabled. I'm not quite sure why the Edge one is enabled, although I have a feeling this might be from the Windows update patch Tuesday that happened this week. So I'm going to let that run next time round and I'll disable it after that point, because I don't use Edge, I use Firefox. EOS utility I use for my camera, so that's off as well. So it's just single-handedly going through and disabling and enabling the ones that you use and don't use. And apart from that, that is all I do really. Everything that I ran through isn't what I do on a monthly basis religiously. It's mainly the maintenance folder, CCleaner, optimized drives just to double check it has ran. You can get it shows you when it last ran, so just making sure that the service is running just in case something sticks in Windows or whatever. So I do those. I don't really check the manual app data folders or anything anymore because I'm using Revo uninstall to get rid of everything, anything that I uninstall. So realistically, the only things that I do from here are backup, drive backup for free file sync, disk cleanup, CCleaner, and obviously the backup and restore for the VHD system images. And within Windows app settings tab, I do sometimes just go into here to check things as well, just to clean up if I just want to check what's being used or consumed. But in terms of spec wise, system speed overall, in general usage, my system runs fast and slick, it boots up quick. Just as quick as a brand new install with nothing installed on it at all. But I've seen systems half the spec of mine that run just as quick as well. As long as you've got a SATA SSD minimum, and then you're doing this level of maintenance, just keeping on top of uninstalls and registry and all that kind of stuff, it will be instant as well. You don't have to have a high spec system. I do a lot of editing and gaming, so I've got the spec for it, but if I had half the spec or even less, as long as I had an SSD, the system would run and boot exactly the same way. So really, there's no stability issues or anything to be worried about unless you've got an inherent hardware problem, which is actually a good point to then show you. Windows has a built-in reliability monitor. So you can access this via shortcut, or you can go to Start, type in reliability. View reliability history, and what this does is it shows you a history of scoring markers. So Windows marks it out of 10, 10 being most stable, 1 being least stable. And if ever a application or a game or a Windows update or something fails, basically, it will show you what that is. So you can see here, I use Logitech Setpoint, or Logitech Options as they call it now. And every now and then, even though I've never physically seen it crash or it has never shown me an error, it will, in the background, or according to Windows at least, stop working. So I'm guessing it stops working and it restarts itself in the background without me even knowing. So that's fine, but it will register that as a flag on the scoreboard. So it's a good way to judge what applications on your system might be causing an issue. For me, that stop responding for Logitech isn't an issue. It never affects anything else in the system. I never even know it does it until I check within here. But it's a good way to check other stuff as well, like has Windows been doing updates, or Windows Defender doing definition updates and things. Again, Logitech crashes through multiple days, so it's a bit strange. This one, Windows was shut down improperly. That wasn't the case. I did the clone from my SSD, and the app itself shut it down. So that's what that relates to. So I know what that's about. But yeah, it's a good way to track reliability history, potential stability issues, and so on. Mentioning another free tool that I use called Kahoot. Actually, this is not free. I think it's a few pounds, but it's well worth it. Especially if you're building a new rig. You've installed your RAM and you're not sure if it's 100% stable at your current settings, or if you're overclocking. So all you'll do is run Kahoot and click go with the default settings, or with these parameters checked. And what it will do is it will run through polling your RAM, making sure that it's fully stable. And if I remember right, you need to let it get to about 4,000 to 5,000% capacity before you can 100% or at least 99% be sure that your RAM is stable. So to get to about 4,000%, it takes about 5-6 hours, depending on how much RAM you've got. I've got 64 gigs, took several hours for me, but by the time I woke up in the morning, I saw that it was at 7,000%, closed Kahoot down, that's stability sorted. So at least it's a way to know if your system is completely stable at your current settings. If it's not, then you can go to the BIOS, tweak some settings and so on, maybe increase the RAM voltage or something like that. But it gives you a good idea to check somewhere at least and tick the box off that your RAM is fine. Then you can look at other areas of the system. But yeah, that's my Windows, and yeah, everything is really quick, really fast. I've never had issues with stability. Nothing runs slow. If I just bring up CMD, you used to be able to, in the olden days, I think it was on Windows 7 and early versions of Windows 10, but you could type system info and it would show you the original install date of your operating system. But for a while now, Windows or Microsoft has changed it so it only shows you the install date of your current version of Windows. System install date, yeah, there you go. So I installed Windows 11 on that date there, and it shows you the boot time as well. But it used to show the first fresh install version. So it used to, up until Windows 10 version, I can't remember what, this used to show my Windows Vista's original install date. So that's quite kind of fun to look at. But it's a bit of a shame that you've lost that. I don't know if there's any other way to get that. If someone knows, let me know in the comments. But yeah, that's my Windows. Just in place upgrade every time, clone SSD over using the SSD tool, and just running it that way. Thanks for watching.